So welcome to a new guide on this channel, and this one we need to talk about the crop, consolidate, freeze, and flatten. Now everything is in tiny chapters, so if you look at the description or the timeline, you can jump to a section or skip the ones you don't want. Now, if you like this, remember to like and subscribe, and if you want to buy me a coffee, you can. Just check the links at the description. So when you work with files on your project, I have a project right here and I saved it. And when you saved it, it's going to give you the name right here at the top. So mine, it's crop, flatten, consolidate, and freeze because this is the topic. But this project has been saved. So when that happens, it's going to give you right here the current project name right there. That is, it says current project. So whatever file you use right here is going to be placed right there. Now there is a tiny difference that I'm going to show you first before we discuss crop, consolidate, and freeze, because you really need to understand this. So when we work with files, let's say that I have a directory called, T files. This one is T files. This directory it lives outside of the scope of this project. It lives on the Ableton directory, but it has nothing to do. It's not inside the project file. So it's not really related. So what I want to do, let's just pretend that this directory is a directory where I have a lot of samples and I just, I want to use them. So if I grab a kick and I just toss it right here, there we go. We have a kick, and it's if I do play, it's just gonna work, right? We already know this. Now this one doesn't live inside our project. It lives within this T files directory. Now if I do right click, I can go and show in the Explorer. This one will bring me, let me just show you right here. This one lives within the Ableton directory because I placed it there on purpose. But this one could live outside of the Ableton directory. This could be whatever directory in our computer, maybe documents or desktop, whatever. So this file, it's not really inside our project. It lives outside, and Ableton, it's using a pointer to this file. So when you save a project, you're not really saving the, a copy of the sound or whatever clip you're using. You're just saving a pointer. So if you go right here at the top and you do collect and save, then what it will do, it will collect and make a copy of your samples, whatever samples that you're using, and it will just create a copy and it will store it within your current project. So if someday this T files goes kaboom, then you don't lose all your samples because they live within your project. They don't live outside the project like right now. Now, so why am I telling you all of this? All of this is just very relevant because when we do crop and we do consolidate and everything else, it's going to do something to the files. It's going to bounce them in some fashion, and then it will just make them part of your project. So since you have several levels, the first level is going to be crop. So if I go right here and I stand on my current project, you have a samples directory. Let me just show you. And if I open the samples directory, we have processed, and inside we have nothing. So we have no files living inside of our project. We just have a kick that lives outside. So if I right click, I can go to crop files and I crop it, and something is going to happen. So I'm going to go to samples, processed, and now we have a crop. So now our computer, our project is using that crop sample. It's not a pointer to the one that lives outside anymore. And if you select or double click and you check right here, notice that the name of this one changed. We have a different name and we have a timestamp. It's really small, but we have a timestamp and you can see it right here. So when you crop, it's going to crop it and add a timestamp to know, so you can know when you did this. So now we know that the crop will create a copy, it will create a timestamp and save it within your projects. Now the crop, what you can do, and the word says, you can maybe adjust whatever it is that you're doing right here, and you can crop it. And then when you crop it, you save that version. Now for now, I'm just gonna keep it like that. And if I go here, we can see the whole waveform that we are creating. Now, what happens if I make this one really short? I'm going to make something like this, something absurd. So I will select this and I will crop it. So when I crop it, it's going to use this, but now it's using the next version. And notice that there is a tiny difference between this one and between this one. Now, this one is super short. And if I want to go back to whatever I had before, we cannot do it because we are using this version with this timestamp, not the other one. So that's the main difference. Now, if you made a mistake and you want to go back, you're just gonna do Control-Z or Control-Z, and it's gonna go back. But you never lose that version of the file that you just cropped. So everything is gonna be stored within crop. So another thing that happens, not when we make it shorter or we crop it, is that when you make changes right here to the sound, those changes will not be stored. For example, I can go right there and just make this kick like super, I'm gonna make it like that, right? I'm just gonna detune the kick. I am going to warp, and I'm gonna maybe add some points right here, just to show you how this works. And I can just break this sample, whatever I want, it's just gonna destroy it. It doesn't matter. This is actually the whole point. I'm gonna maybe do something like this, something really obvious, and there we go. I'm just destroying the sample. So let's say that this is the kick we want, right? Let's just pretend that this is a good sound. So when we crop this, it's going to save a version of this, but none of this will be stored. So if I go right here and crop it, I'm going to crop the clip, kaboom, it's going to do something, and then we have a third version of the kick. Now, can you see what's weird right here? So we have a kick right there, pretty destroyed. Now, if I play it, it sounds like a kick. And if I compare this with the first one, it sounds exactly the same. So this means that when you crop it, it's going to save a version, but an untouched version of whatever you did. So all the warping and the detuning, it's not really happening, right? All of this works or lives, all these changes, they live within the Ableton project, but the sample stays untouched. The only thing that it's just remembering is just the original sample. Everything else, it's within your project, not the sample. Now, what's going to happen with MIDI? Let me just bring this down, and on this file, I have a MIDI right here. If I bring it, it's going to be really long. I'm going to say no. So we have a very long MIDI clip. So if I go right there, just make it shorter, I know that at some point I can make it bigger. Now this one doesn't work like the audio. That right here is not going to store a new version of the MIDI file on your current project. But if you crop it, it will crop it. I'm going to do something like that. I'm going to go right there, right here, and I'm going to say crop it. So now if I make it bigger, it's just not going to happen. You're just cropping it. So everything that you had right there, it's gone. And if I go to the current project and try to find it, you're just not going to find it. And it's because it works a little bit different with audio and MIDI files. Now, always, if you want to go back, you just can, do Control-C or Z and go back to whatever you had from before. So on MIDI, it's really useful when you want to adjust something, the length of a MIDI, and then when you know that you want to use that version, you just crop it and you know that you will use that version. Now I'm going to delete all this, and we will need to talk about the next level, which is going to be Consolidate. Now, if we go to the current project, I've erased everything, but you still have the information right here. So if at some point you want to go back to whatever you had from before, you just can drag and drop, and you have a saved version, right? So this is not what I want to do. I'm going to delete everything that we have on the crop. I'm going to select that directory, and I'm just going to trash it. So the Consolidate works in a different way. I'm going to go to T files, and remember this directory lives outside the current project. I'm going to use this file, right? It's a pretty long file. I'm just going to toss it right there. There we go. I want to work with this one. Now I'm going to make it shorter because it's just very long. I'm just going to make it like that. So what I want to do, I want to make some changes to this sample, and I want to store a version of this on our current project. If I do crop, we know that that works. It's going to store whatever version, and we know we will have it right here. Right. So the Consolidate, it's going to work a little bit different. If I start making a lot of changes to this sample and messing around with this sample, when you Consolidate, is going to record all those changes, which is something, the opposite of cropping. So if I apply some fades, something like that, I'm going to do something pretty obvious. I'm going to be doing this. I'm going to be going right here, maybe right there. I'm going to be warping this, and I'm just going to mess this sample and this sound pretty much. Can just do a lot. So we can have something really obvious. It's gonna sound like that. So let's pretend that this is the final sound. This is what we want. So if we want to convert everything that we did and we want to consolidate, the consolidate will just record whatever you did on the warping, all the, the detuning, everything that you did is going to bounce it and it's going to render a version of this. So if I go right click and I go to consolidate, you have right here, consolidate right there. I'm going to do this. And remember, you need to be careful because you cannot go back. I'm going to consolidate. It will bounce everything, and now whatever we did, it's like burned into a new version of this. And if I play it, we have that. Right, I'm gonna be stopping it, and now notice that when we go to the current project, it's going to save a version of this consolidated, sound inside of our project. So remember that you're just losing the original sample. So what you can do, you can maybe bring whatever you have right here as an original sample, right? Maybe you can make it smaller and do whatever it is that you need to do. And if this is what you're going to be using, first you crop it so you store the original version, and then you just, mess around with this and you do whatever it is that you need to do, and then you bounce it, you consolidate this. So once it's done, this is what you're going to be using. But if you always want to go back, you always have the cropped version of this, which is going to be the untouched version, the unmodified version, right? Now, another thing that happens right here is that the consolidate, and I'm going to go back to the original recording. I'm going to bring it from the outside. I'm going to drop it right there. And again, this is going to be the file. So when we consolidate this, what we'll do, the consolidate, it will normalize the clip. Right now, if I select this and go right here, notice that the gain says 0 dB. So if I do right click and go to consolidate right here, it's going to bounce it. But at the end of the day, it will, change the gain. And it's because the consolidate will normalize the clip. So I'm going to delete this. I'm going to go to the T files directory, which is, the outside folder. And I'm going to throw a MIDI. So what's going to happen when we consolidate a MIDI? So nothing happens. It works like the crop. So if I maybe make it smaller and I consolidate this, it's going to just do that. It's going to consolidate that clip. So now that clip, it's not longer anymore in this case. So, okay, I'm going to delete this and we are going to go back. And if I go to the current project, now we have a lot of cropping files and a lot of consolidated files. We can't delete them if we are not using them in the project. Make sure that you delete them if you delete them. And we need to talk about the freeze. So the freeze, what you can do, and I'm going to show you, much prefer to show you, is a little bit different from consolidate and cropping. It's a little bit different, but it's very related at some point when we talk about flatten. I'm going to go to instruments, maybe not instruments, I'm going to go to plugins. And I'm going to bring something I know that consumes a lot of memory. I'm going to bring Zerum. So I'm going to just toss it right here. It just doesn't matter. And we'll go right here and just put some MIDI inside. And this is going to sound a little bit loud. So I will go down on the volume. And if I play it, we get something like that. So randomly, I'm just going to select some patch, something like that. If I play it, it sounds like that, which is fine. Now, notice that this is playing. And right here at the top, it's telling you the consumption of CPU. And it's a lot. So Zerum consumes a lot of CPU. And we already know this. Now, what happens if on top of this, you want to use audio effects? If you want to use a delay, well, the delays and reverbs, they use a lot of memory. So I'm going to be tossing a lot of just, instances right here. So I'm faking this, right? So pretending that this is something useful, but it's not, right? Just to prove a point and just bringing different things. Right, so I'm going to do one more. It doesn't matter. So if I play this, it's going to sound a little bit weird. Or maybe not. Well, it sounds a little bit weird. But as you can see right here at the top, the consumption is a lot. It's 20%. Sometimes it's going to be 24, 23. It's crazy. It's just crazy. So this is going to be useful, but when you add more instruments or more things like plugins and a lot of things, this is going to kill your project. It's going to, you're going to get glitches and a lot of things because it's just consuming way too much. So what you can do freeze. So the freeze will listen to whatever you have right here and whatever you're doing right here on the channel, and it will just bounce an audio version. And then it's going to play that audio version. So you don't need to bounce this to a directory and then use it. You can just do it on the fly. So I'm going to go to the channel. I'm going to do a right click, and you have run something right here that says freeze track. So when I do so, it's going to take a little bit of time because it's going to be processing all this and converting this to audio. So when it's done, it's going to give you this blue thing, like blue layer, telling you that this is a frozen channel. So this means that right now, if I play it, notice that we get the same thing, the same sound, but the consumption is 1%. It is because behind the scenes, it's playing the audio version of whatever we are doing on this channel. And it's just a fantastic thing to reduce whatever it is that you're doing. Now, of course, what you cannot do, you cannot go to Zerum and adjust the values because this is frozen. You just cannot touch it. You cannot make changes. But if you do need to make changes, you really need to do it. You can unfreeze the track. You have to right click right here and do unfreeze track, and it's just going to unfreeze it. You can make your changes and then freeze it again. And there you go. Notice it's just, since there was no change, it's just not doing the rendering. I'm going to just show you again. I'm going to do unfreeze. And let's say that I want to make some changes. I'm going to go to this one, and I don't know. I'm going to just change some values. And now I'm going to freeze it again. It's going to take a little bit of time because it's creating a new version of the audio file that is going to be playing at the back. So there we go. So now we can play it, and we're going to be able to hear the changes. So if you're wondering what's going to happen when we freeze, well, at this point, you should know with the crop and the consolidate that everything will go to a current project. And on the process, if we crop a file, it's going to be a version is going to be stored right here. If we freeze, a version is going to be stored right here. So this one is this one is the first. This one is the second one, right? So everything you do is going to be stored. Now, if you so desire, you can bring whatever version you do right here, and you can maybe eliminate this. If you want to use the audio version, you can do that. Now, this is just super weird. Now, if I go right here, notice that you have an option that says flatten. Now, if I unfreeze the track, you don't get the flatten track. Now, the flatten track, I'm going to freeze it again. I guess it's going to create a new version. Maybe I made a change. It's going to create a new version. This is going to be the version number 3 right here. So the flatten track, what it does is going to take whatever audio file we rendered behind the scenes, and it's going to replace it right here. So notice then when we are freezing this, we have this version. Now, if I do something like this, it will be almost completely, actually, it's going to be completely equal to doing flatten. So the flatten will, what we'll do, it will just replace all of this with this version. And I can prove it. I'm going to go to flatten, and it's very quick. It's just not rendering files because we already have it rendered, right? We already processed this. So that's all. It's just using this version of the file. And when we flatten the track, we don't get a folder that says flatten, right? We just get the freeze. So when you crop, you freeze, and you flatten and you consolidate, and freeze and flatten are just pretty much the same. The bitrate is going to change a little bit, and I'm going to be showing this. I'm going to go to that kick. Now, this kick is a very vintage kick. So the file, and if I double click it and make this one a little bit bigger, it says right there that it's 16 bits. So yeah, it's pretty low. Now, if I go to my project folder preferences, I'm going to show you that right here, we are doing 24, right? So whenever I record something or, export something, it's going to be 24. Now, I can change it to 16 or go to 32. It's completely up to you. But in my case, it's going to be 24. So when I toss this file, let me just go right there, and we use it, it's going to be 16. We know this. I'm going to be selecting this. I'm going to be cropping this, and now we know that we have a version, and we are using that version because we have the timestamp. And if we go to current project, we can confirm this. And if I click it or, check this version, we keep the 16 bit. So that's fine, all right? So that's fine. So what's going to happen when we consolidate? So when I'm going to go right there and I'm going to consolidate this. I'm not doing anything. So when we consolidate, we get the same file, but now it's going to be a little bit different because now it says 24-bit. So what the F is going on? So if we crop, it's going to keep whatever bitrate we had on the original file, but when we consolidate, it's going to use whatever you have on preferences right here. So you need to be aware of this because if you want to keep your kick on 16, well, this is just going to convert it to 24. So what's going to happen when we freeze and flatten the track? Right, so I'm going to freeze the track. It's going to freeze it, and I'm going to go to flatten track. So what do you think it's going to happen? So if I go to this file, we can see that it's not 16, of course. It's not 24, but it's 32. So what it's doing whenever you flatten the track, after you freeze it, is going to use the maximum it can do to convert and, just flatten the track, just bounce the file. So it's going to use 32. And all of this is something that maybe not relevant for you. Maybe you just don't give an F, but it's something that maybe you just need to know that whenever you freeze is going to, or flatten is going to do 32s, or it's going to use if you use consolidate, it's going to do 24. And if you do crop, it's going to keep whatever you had from before. So that's it. So hopefully you learned the differences between cropping, freezing, consolidating, and flattening. And now you know how to, use all of these files and all the different versions. Now remember, if you liked and learned something on this one, to like and subscribe. And if you have the money and you want to buy me a coffee, you can. Go to the links at the description. You have Google Thanks. Sorry, I will say Google Thanks. It's YouTube Thanks. You have PayPal and you have a Patreon. Maybe you can be a 1-month patron and just maybe buy me a coffee. Why not? All right, so see you on the next one.